Three, two, one.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, granitegrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from granitegrok.com.
Grok Talk.
Yes, folks, it is time for Grok Talk. I am, once again, Skip Murphy here at Grok Talk, of production of granitegrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. I've got Mike here in studio, and we are also blessed to have Max Abramson here giving us an extended, in this case, criminal justice update. And we were talking about dogs in the break. Dogs in the lap of people in cars, dogs in the laps of people in cars driving the cars. And there was a bill in the House. And I kind of look at this as one of those more spurious types of things, sort of like the person who wanted to eliminate RC boats because it drove up on somebody's lawn and mangled their bushes. She wanted them outlawed. So talk to us about the cars, the dogs, the people, and the cell phones, and the bill.
Well, this isn't the worst one.
The worst one of all time, the worst legislation as an alternative to personal responsibility of all time was people who were swimming through boating lanes. The legislator was doing this on behalf of a constituent, and she wanted to have, and the constituent, I think, wanted to have a visible safety device floating behind the swimmer with a chain or rope or tether of some kind attached to the swimmer's neck.
A chain?
Yes.
Is she some sort of bondage freak?
No, she wanted to have the floating safety device well behind the swimmer, floating with a little tiny international orange flag, and then a little tether that would then attach to the swimmer's neck. And I thought that's got to be 10 times worse than just having a swimmer out there. You're better off just not being seen. And I said, I went to sea for a living for 10 years. People have bright orange hats that stick out, and they're much, much safer than having something chained to you. But it turns out in Japan, as a safety device, Japan, which we tend to think of as having their act together, except on this one issue.
And TV shows.
You have to, and anime, and they have to have a little tether attached to their neck, and people get killed in Japan with these things, just like the horse stock life jackets that the Coast Guard requires. They did testing on that. They had people jump in the water and they were decapitated.
Wow.
So then the Coast Guard mandated those.
Wow.
Mandatory death. That's the modern nanny state. No, it's the Nurse Ratched state. So this one was the dog in the lap bill. I had a constituent come up to me the day before going to testify on the cell phone disabling bill, HB 103, which was laughed out of committee. And I testified on that when I testified against it, of course. And, sorry, the dog in the lap. I said, this bill is just like the dog in the lap idea. I had a constituent yesterday come up to me and say, you've got people driving around with a dog in the lap. You should do something about that. And I tried to explain to this constituent how unenforceable that would be. And sure enough, someone on the committee was the prime sponsor on this dog in the lap bill, which I had no idea existed. And he nodded and he said, "Yep, that's my bill." And I thought, oh my gosh, I've just insulted, here's the prime sponsor of another nanny state bill. And I don't think that he sees it that way.
No, they just don't get the basic idea of either negligent driving or without due care and attention, as the Brits call it, or contributory negligence to something bad that happens, which Heinlein calls bad luck. Basically, you are responsible, and if you do something stupid, if you're looking at the passenger while you're driving and you hit something, it's your fault. If you're fiddling with the radio, brushing your hair, whatever else it is, putting on your makeup, and you hit something, it's your fault. If it's the dog, same thing. Do I need a law against makeup, hair brushes, passengers, cell phones, dogs, cats, and
Scratching your nose.
and the mosquito that flew in through the back window? I don't think so.
Max, I do have to ask the question, and it keeps coming up. And I remember that cell phone bill. That was the one where, after a vehicle's going faster than 5 miles an hour, it was supposed to cut off the cell phone, which basically, if you think about it, okay, that's all right maybe for the driver, but then you think about all the occupants in the car, yada, yada, yada. Is a manufacturer going to put in such a device and software that it would do that and suffice it? No, we'd end up with none of us would have cell phones at that point.
I mean, just let me paint the picture. So it doesn't work unless you're under 5 miles an hour. So I'm using my smartphone as a navigation device, and every junction I come up to, I stomp on the brakes, threatening all sorts of accidents to get the vehicle under 5 miles an hour to see if it's time to turn yet, and then accelerate again.
Yeah. So that was laughed out, and I'm glad to hear that. But my question was going to be, don't our representatives ever think to be able to tell the constituents, yes, I represent you, but this really is a bad idea, and here's why I don't want to put this in? I mean, it's almost akin to the idea that nobody is responsible to see what's constitutional until it gets to the courts. And I'm sorry, if you are I think we as individuals, citizens, should be saying, is this constitutional or not, and then arguing against it. Certainly legislators are supposed to be saying, or should be saying, before this bill gets even written, is this even unconstitutional in the least bit? And the same thing with this bill. What did the representative think? Did he say anything to his constituent?
He's totally serious. Unfortunately, a lot of the legislators come up with ideas like this. They're worse than the...
Yeah. Do New Hampshire legislators take an oath to support and defend the Constitution like national ones do?
Yes, they do. Yes, we do. On Organization Day, we don't just take the oath. We also sign a paper that says we're going to follow both the federal and state Constitution.
Which kind of means that you should be thinking about the Constitution to begin with. Now, I did put this post up last night, and I put, headline is good, the reason is better. Kansas Senate votes to eliminate concealed carry licensing requirements, sort of what we started off with HB 560, whatever it was. It just escaped me. But the constitutional carry bill here in
582.
582. Here's what the Kansas State Senate president said. Today we must vote, and when in doubt, and this is the important part, and when in doubt, I believe that if we err, we ought to do so on the side of freedom and the continued protection of our most basic constitutional rights. What a concept! Oh my gosh, that somebody would say freedom should come first, the Constitution should come first, and then we'll talk about the other stuff. So... I have to say, but this guy's a chucklehead for doing
almost
this.
Every time I testify on a bill, one of the first things out of my mouth is, as I always say in testifying, first, government should do no harm. The very first thing, government should do no harm. And many of these victimless crimes, the problem with all victimless crimes is they break down respect for the rule of law, they're almost all unenforceable, and they make crime worse. Once you break down respect for the rule of law, once you start prosecuting everyone for everything, what does the law mean? America has more victimless felonies than all other countries combined.
It just absolutely drives me crazy when I look at the laws coming out of the sausage makers, and you got to go, what were they thinking? And by the way, I just want to let people know that the person who just came in is Representative Josh Moore at the long end of the table here. We're going to be hearing from him on something that's even worse than some of these nanny state idea bills that have gone through, but a bureaucratic snafu concerning our Department of Education commissioner. And I posted that thing, and I just could not believe it. But I want to say thanks for coming into Grok Talk. By all means, if you want to say something, pipe up. This is a free-for-all. All we do, we don't interview people. We just have a conversation around the table. So feel free to join in here, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thanks for coming in to Grok Talk.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
All right.
So, anyways, something I wanted, a practical application of the constitutional carry bill. We've been hearing a lot from the law enforcement, the state troopers testifying against it in uniform, bringing their authority as a paid employee. I really get upset when a taxpayer-paid employee comes in to argue against something that enhances my constitutional rights. It drives me crazy, but there was this story that I put up last night about a Gordon Potter. Let me just pull that up, and it was something that, I went right past it. Where is it? There we go. And he got caught. He was weaving in and out of traffic. He was a felon. He had an outstanding felony, a parole violation warrant against him. He had heroin on him. He had prescription drugs on him. He had a concealed knife, pretty much, in the car with him. He had a shotgun in the back. He also had a Kel-Tec 5.56 pistol in the trunk with the shotgun. And I'm thinking to myself, all these people who want the universal background check that you talked about earlier, the constitutional carry, which the opponents are saying, this will result in these felons having all these kinds of weapons. And I just listed some of the laws that he broke right through here. And first off, he's a felon. He's already broken a law, a serious law, just to have that. He's also done something against his parole. So there's another law. He wasn't supposed to have guns at all. He had 2 guns. He didn't undergo the background check for the guns, I'm quite sure, because he would have been stopped from purchasing those guns. If it was a universal background check, it's already illegal for somebody to sell a gun to somebody who is illegal to have a gun. And that may have happened twice. The press reported it as an automatic weapon. So did this guy, Gordon Potter, go through the NFA background check to have a tier 3 weapon, an automatic weapon? The press reported that it was also silenced, and one of our sharp-eyed commentators saw that it was the silencer was labeled FS22, which is it's a fake silencer. But if it had been true, did he go and have that? Did he apply for that next stamp for again another NFA device? Let's see, what else did he have? I think I've listed all those. Oh, and he gave the police a false identity. So I'm thinking, would the universal background check have worked in this case? No. He would have failed the NICS already. I mean, there's just so many things wrong in so many different ways. How would this apply to the person pushing this universal background check, Representative Cushing, right?
Right.
What would he have said to this?
I don't want to put words in his mouth. I get along very well with Representative Cushing.
But the intent.
I understand there's a lot of emotion that goes into gun control laws. But I was just thinking on the way here, gun control laws, I have never heard of a single gun control law in my entire life that has ever, under any circumstances, prevented any criminal from getting a weapon and using it on someone. In fact, the woman who came down during that brawl with the upturned knife and beer bottle, the jury didn't get to hear about it, but after I pulled those out of her hands, she ran up to just go grab another weapon. She grabbed a hatchet and chased my housemate down with a hatchet, yelling she's going to kill him for calling the cops. So if she'd been disarmed of a firearm, that's not going to stop her from grabbing another weapon. I've never heard of a single circumstance ever where any gun control law has ever had that effect. And yet a lot of these gun grabbers don't care that crime gets worse when they enact these strict gun control laws, that it puts us at a disadvantage. They don't care. They're willing to accept the higher violent crime rates because they have such a hoplophobia, such an irrational fear of firearms that they want to do something. And if something makes crime worse, they're willing to accept the higher crime rate to feel like they've accomplished something.
Because they don't believe you should defend yourself or protect yourself. And so they, in the interest of trying to create a gun-free society, or in the name of trying to create a gun-free society, what they create is a defenseless society, which is what government wants anyway.
Some of them might allow you to at least reveal the fact that you have a firearm on your hip if, and only if, you're in the process of being stabbed, if you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you're about to get killed in just the very next second, and that you don't have any other option except to reveal you might be allowed to use non-deadly force, which brings me to another topic, which is my deadly force bill, HB 598. They might allow just a little bit. They might allow you to say, hey, maybe brandish the weapon. Hey, you're about to murder me. I don't want to get murdered. I don't want my family members to get murdered.
Okay,
So,
well, that's a good question, because sometimes and I've not been in this situation, but I could see where, as you said, if you are carrying concealed and you have a firearm on your hip and you just pull your jacket back so that somebody sees it, is that legally considered brandishing? Or does it have to be pulled out of the holster? And even if you're just holding it without your finger on the trigger, just holding it, pointing it in a low ready position, is that considered brandishing?
And I don't believe the law is clear on that. What is brandishing? Is it displaying? Is it handling? And, of course, what's going to happen in every self-defense case is your attacker or some witness who's hysterical is going to say, you are waving it around wildly everywhere. You are windmilling it. You are waving it around crazy. You are crazed, and you are out of control. They're going to say that every single time. They're always going to play down the attack or say, oh, I was just holding the knife. I was just holding the chainsaw. I was just holding the machete.
Oh, yeah, machetes. And here in New York State, I don't know whether you folks have heard about this, but in addition to the SAFE Act, which is basically trying to disarm the civilian populace, now a state senator has decided, oh, you mean these people can buy machetes online and have them delivered to New York? 3 people have been stabbed over the last few years, so now he wants to make machetes illegal in the state of New York.
Now, of course, if those 3 people had been carrying firearms, their attackers would have run screaming.
Well, the thing is that this is a farm implement. You use it to cut brush with. It isn't just to hack people off, although you hear about that being used by people who in other countries who can't afford a gun.
Yet when it's an upturned beer bottle, no one suggests banning beer. When
trust me, they did. But they did that back in the 1919s. Prohibition. They banned beer.
Right.
But not beer bottles. You could still get Coke or Pepsi.
That's true. That's true.
Right. I mean, nowadays everything's in either plastic bottles or aluminum cans, which, yeah, they can have sharp edges, but you got to really work at it to expose the sharp edges.
And did you know that in New Hampshire, because of our in almost all 50 states, I think, you can commit negligent vehicular homicide to prevent someone from shoplifting, because negligently killing someone doesn't meet the definition of deadly force. To be deadly force, you have to purposefully or knowingly cause serious bodily injury or death, and it's not clear what serious bodily injury is. For example, if you come home from a hunting trip and you see your 14-year-old daughter being attacked by 2 hooligans in masks in her bedroom and they're cutting up her face, does that meet the definition of serious bodily injury? Unfortunately, if you sit there and you pick at every word, it might not, because serious bodily injury is severe, protracted injury or permanent impairment of any part of the body, and the definition is so vague and so open to interpretation that you can't act yourself. Now, if she's 13, it might be a felony against her, because now the victim, you're causing bodily injury, not serious bodily injury, to someone under the age of 13. However, if you peruse the statute, RSA 627, Section 4, Part 2, it says if they are committing unlawful deadly force against another, or if they're committing a felony against the actor. Well, your daughter isn't the actor unless you throw her the shotgun or rifle. You can't do anything on her behalf because they're committing a felony against her, not against you. Any member of your family is another person. So if they're not using deadly force against a family member, there's nothing you can do about it, because what are you going to do? Are you just going to brandish the weapon?
Yeah, at that point I say the law is an ass, and I'll take the time in jail to defend my daughter in such a situation.
At that point, you put a bullet in them so they can't tell tales.
But now there's the problem of the physical evidence. All they've done is cut up her face.
They're in your house attacking somebody, aren't they? Next.
Yeah, really.
The problem is
my castle, their coffin.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. I want to get back to the definition of deadly force, which is in your bill. So what is it, and what is it that you want to make it?
The current definition of deadly force is covered under RSA 627, Section 9, Part 2, and it says essentially there are 2 definitions. The first part is any assault or confinement which the actor causes, which he knows to create a substantial risk of causing serious bodily injury or death. However, if it's a firearm, the rule for firearm is purposely firing a weapon in the direction of another or a vehicle that is known to be occupied. So what is known to be occupied? If it's parked, then that's very difficult to prove. It's all based on eyewitness testimony. What is firing in the direction of another? Can it be 90 degrees, 60 degrees, 45 degrees? Are you purposefully trying to shoot them? Now you've got a new mens rea involved, a new state of mind. So it creates all these legal complications trying to figure out exactly what deadly force is in a real emergency. So the intent here is to simplify the definition to simply causing permanent disability or death. So one of the arguments made in the Criminal Justice Committee was, during the hearing, if somebody's shooting at me, does that mean that I have to wait until I get shot before I can shoot back? And of course it doesn't, because what the law says, if someone is about to use unlawful deadly force against you or someone else, that you're allowed to use deadly force in defense of yourself or another. And yet the Criminal Justice Committee, some of their members haven't read the law or haven't read it in a long time, and they've just gone off on these tangents and just assumed that the law means something that it doesn't mean, or that, I think that they're assuming that I haven't actually read my own bill, or that I know less about self-defense than the next guy.
So what has happened to the bill?
It's going to go up for executive session, I believe, next week.
Which means?
Which means they're going to debate it, they're going to argue it. It's not a public hearing. It's not something where you just go in and make the case for or against the bill. It's where they mark it up, or they retain it, or they decide that it ought to pass, or that it's inexpedient to legislate, and then they decide whether or not to put it on the consent calendar. The consent calendar, of course, is they lump a whole bunch of different bills on that are unanimously supported or opposed, and they just kind of push them all through as one big consent calendar. Yes. So a whole bunch of bills get passed and killed all at once in one big voice vote.
Voice vote, never a roll call.
Not on the consent calendar. It's just these are things that are obviously, the committee's view, are obviously not even worth debating on the floor. So a lot of laws get passed unanimously.
They're so far in favor or so far against that there's no reason to have a debate, because you're not going to have a close vote.
That's what they're assuming, or it's not worth spending an hour debating a bill that they think is just a slam dunk, or is just a terrible bill. I have another bill on third-party ballot access that is not only ITL'd, it's been put on the consent calendar, so I'm having to pull it off and have a little floor fight on it.
Great.
Okay, super. Let me just ask you about an additional bill that's floating around.
Okay, we've only got a couple minutes there, sir.
That's okay. HB 685, which is a Stop the Fed Gun Grabbers bill. I have an alert here in my greasy fingers from the 10th Amendment Center saying support this bill. Are you aware of it?
I believe that's the one. Isn't that the one in an emergency? I might actually have it here. 685. Yep. Prohibit a state agency, state employee, or political subdivision from.
And the Katrina bill.
Right. In the state of an emergency, the only thing that most of the federal officials did during the Katrina disaster, they didn't provide food, clothing, shelter, medical supplies. The vast majority of them were just going around disarming people. And, of course, large numbers of people died. Large numbers of people suffered, lost their homes. And the government didn't do anything except disarm people. And the consequence was, of course, there's a lot of looting of what was left. And now there's a debate in the legislature about whether or not the state should permit state officials or law enforcement officials to just go around disarming people in an emergency. And it didn't just deal with firearms. There was a good amount of debate and discussion about whether or not firearms accessories should be confiscated in an emergency. One of the accessories that was mentioned was suppressors again. And my question is, why is there an issue of accessories, firearms accessories, straps, holsters? Why are those things being confiscated?
Which can sometimes, or most often, cost more than the actual firearm they're attached to. I think you're right, because there you're saying, again, as I said earlier in the show, freedom versus safety and security. The problem is that if you believe that the government is responsible for you, the Supreme Court has already ruled many times that the police are not responsible for your individual safety. If we see a natural and a constitutional right to the right of self-defense, well, pick up a club, pick up a whatever. The problem is, and I think it really holds true, Colt created the equalizer. And we saw that in a lot of the testimony on the gun bills, in that a gun in the hand of an older, weaker, or various sex, 250-pound man is going to have a harder time fighting against a 113-pound woman if she's got pistols in both her hands than not. And I don't understand why they wouldn't just agree to eliminate the diminishment of the capability to self-defense. I mean, I'm getting old. I used to be, when I was practicing martial arts, I could stand 6 inches from you and put my right foot in your ear all day long. I can't, I'd be lucky to reach your knees at this point. I've lost that flexibility. So, but to have a firearm, it equalizes that environment where if somebody's coming after me, I have the ability to put up some kind of defense, especially in a Katrina disaster type of environment, although those generally don't happen here in New Hampshire. But just, again, it goes back to what I read from that Kansas State Senate president. We ought to be deferring to freedom first and constitutional rights first instead of anything else.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. Benjamin Franklin said anyone who would give away some of their liberty for some imaginary security gets neither. And what we've seen, at least in recent history, is...
He actually said deserves neither, correctly.
Deserves neither. And recent experience and common sense say that you lose both at the same time. You trade away liberty and security for tyranny.
Indeed. Folks, it's time for us to take a quick 90-second break. We are going to be right back, and we're going to be talking with Representative Josh Moore concerning that execrable note that Commissioner Virginia Barry put out, basically saying, parents, you have no rights to your kids. We'll be right back. This is Grok Talk.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Grok Talk.